This is the business of sports.
The business of sports can be intimidating or hard for a starter to break into.
We really appreciate when our owners are actually there, with us through the journey.
Teams, ours especially, have been very intentional to diversify at all levels of the company.
I think we're in the golden years for the NFL and college football.
Our demographic reach has continued to expand.
This is going to be really unlocking the streaming platform for sports fans.
Sports valuations are rising. We'll see when they peak.
You don't have to be the best in your sport to make a whole ton of money.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with my colleagues Damian Sassower and Vanessa Perdomo. Scarlett Fu is on assignment. Coming up on the show, we talk college basketball with Atlantic 10 Commissioner Bernadette McGlade ahead of March Madness.
The timing is right for the student athletes to be able to monetize their name, image, and likeness. And I'm happy that it's finally here. It certainly is going to change the landscape of Division I college athletics, but I think it's going to change it for the better.
Plus, we talked through reporting from our very own Vanessa Perdomo, along with Bloomberg News reporter Jennah Haque on the growth of women's sports and the hope that players can start to finally cash in.
All that and more is on the way on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. But first, we have to check in on Dallas Mavericks fans.
Boy. Michael Barr, fans are not happy with the team after they traded away superstar Luka Doncic, but that isn't all. Now they've lost Kyrie Irving for the season due to a torn ACL, and it looks like, my goodness, Anthony Davis, who they traded for, might very well be out for the season. It is the Spencer Dinwiddie show in Dallas. Michael Barr.
And to top it off, season ticket prices are slated to go up almost 9%. Oof. Joining us to discuss the state of affairs with the Mavericks is Bloomberg Dallas Bureau Chief Julie Fine. Julie, welcome to the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Thanks for having me back.
Man, the Dallas Mavericks, you talk about something rough going, and we're going to get more into it in a second. But right now, the Maverick fans are being hit with an 8.6% price hike after trading Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers. Can you please tell us the pain the people in Dallas are going through?
It's not a good situation. I mean, especially for them when the Mavericks basically came out and said, as you look at what they said about it, they said it basically had to do a little bit with fan engagement. So obviously if you look at the exact quote, it's ongoing investments in the team and fan engagement. That really was the explanation for this price hike. So it's just been a rough road. I mean, for fans that come, and as you know, basketball fans here, they're a loyal bunch to the team. Very upset. Luka Doncic was really well liked here. He was extremely well liked in the community. Obviously, there were questions about the team was saying the questions about his fitness, whatnot, but in the community, he was really well liked, and he is a global star. So fans here, the anger is not subsiding.
Julie, the interesting thing for me there is how can they possibly, justify saying that it's because of fan engagement that they're able to raise the prices. But right now, seemingly all of the fan engagement is really negative, and a lot of people ended up canceling their season tickets after Luka was traded.
Yeah, I'm sure when fans saw that quote that we all had, it was even more frustrating. It has been one frustration after another for Mavs fans. First, Luka's gone. Then you get Anthony Davis. Then he gets injured. Then you see Luka go to LA, and Dirk Nowitzki went there as well to cheer him on. Now, Dirk, of course, obviously saying he's a Mavs fan for life. But just for Mavs fans, it's just been heartbreaking now to have to deal with spending more money to see a team that's disappointing them. It'll be very interesting to see how this affects the bottom line for them when it comes to season tickets.
Well, Julie, let's just crystallize it for our audience here, please. The Lakers are in second place in the West, okay? By comparison, the Mavs are in 10th and fighting for their playoff life. But, what really caught my attention was the quotes by Adelson's son-in-law, Patrick Dumont, when he announced the ticket increase. He says, quote, ongoing investments in the team and fan engagement. That's the reason that they're raising the price. Are they just moving the team to Las Vegas? Julie, what is going on here? How do you throw that in your fans' face after the record and, the blowback since Luka? Is there any truth to that rumor?
Well, they've been saying that all along, but I sat down with Patrick Dumont when he was here, months ago, obviously not recently, and they said they are committed to Dallas and they're committed to being here. So, they're saying all along that they're committed to being here, but of course fans are curious about that. Of course they're wondering about it, so they can say it until they're blue in the face. But again, this is just another thing that fans are dealing with. Now, again, I'm going to get into a little Texas politics here. As you know, online gambling, casino gambling, that is not legal here, and it is not making major headway in the legislature. So in terms of a destination resort, I don't see that happening in Texas for some time now. But again, they have said over and over that they are committed to Dallas and they're committed to the fans. The person who I think has a lot to wonder about right now is Nico, the general manager.
Look, we could talk about Nico all we want. They're calling for his head there, but let's just talk the numbers here. The Mavericks are valued, I think, according to Forbes, at $4.7 billion, right? So, that's up from, just, $2.5 billion in 2020. So it's not like the team hasn't doubled pretty much almost its market value in just the last 5 years, right? So, what is moving to Las Vegas really going to get you in incremental value? What am I missing here? Where does that argument, I guess, hold any ground, Julie?
Well, I think what you're missing here is the same thing that people have continued to be curious about, what is the point of moving them? But again, they say over and over, they are not interested in moving the team. But I'm buying what you're selling there. There's a major question about that. But again, they're doing well here financially. This is a city that loves its sports. It really does. People say, we're not necessarily one of the biggest sports towns. Now, I tend to disagree with that. But again, I happen to live here in Dallas. But each of the teams here has very, very, very close fan bases that continue to follow them. Even the Stars. The Stars, look, they're doing great. They're heading into the playoffs. So in terms of why move them, that's an open question. But they continue to say over and over that that is not what their interest is.
Now, and I know, Damian and everybody, when you think of the Dallas Mavericks, the first name that comes to mind is Mark Cuban. But let's bring up some history here. The casino billionaire, the family of Miriam Adelson, they bought control of the Mavericks from Cuban. That was in 2023.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's what's kind of fueling the fire, I guess.
Yeah, that's another thing that's fueling it. So, and in case you forgot, NBA fans, the Mavericks were in the NBA Finals last year. So, Julie, I guess this is another reason why people are ticked off at the Mavericks.
Well, and I think you have to remember, though, Mark Cuban is no longer running the Mavericks. Sure, he still owns a big piece of it, but he is not running the Mavericks. So this is not a Mark Cuban decision, with Luka. Now, how he feels about it, he has not come out and said Mark is an excellent businessman, as you all know, but he is not. Patrick Dumont is on the board of governors. this is his team.
Julie, one of the things, obviously that Mark Cuban said when he sold the team was that the way that the NBA is moving towards real estate and things like that, he felt like that wasn't, his area of expertise. That was the reason he gave, right? That was the public-facing reason, and felt that, the Adelsons were going to be able to secure a new arena. Can you tell us about that and what's going on? And there's even some movement moving the team to Irvine. Is that correct? Let me know about that.
Well, they've discussed moving the team out of downtown, but it's interesting because in downtown, they're in an area called Victory Park, and literally right across the thruway there is where they practice. Irving is where the Dallas Cowboys used to play before they moved to Frisco, but there's plenty of space there. Irving also probably has more space for some sort of destination resort if they wanted to do that. But then again, you get back to the gambling aspect of it, which is a totally different ball game here in the state of Texas, and that may have to go on the ballot, even if they make any type of progress with that in the legislature. But Irving, by the way, is 20 minutes outside the city. It's not very far. So, but at this point, nobody's broken ground on anything. There hasn't been any of that. I think right now they're just sort of, catching their breath from this period of time that they're going through.
Julie, you mentioned Nico Harrison, and, we kind of all don't want to talk about it because it's just so bad. but I wonder, you're on the ground there. Talk to me about what's the word coming out of Jason Kidd's camp? Has he commented at all since the Luka trade?
Yeah, I haven't heard much from Jason Kidd. Now, I'm not following all of his pressers every day, so let me be the first on that. But I haven't heard much from his camp. Yeah, I haven't heard much from his camp. I mean, Jason Kidd also works for Nico Harrison. So, I mean, he spoke very honestly. I mean, listen, you all saw the day they spoke about the trade, and then you all saw what Luka's reaction was when he was in Los Angeles, when he was introduced. I mean, the whole thing was just mind-boggling. It's still, in a way, it's very mind-boggling. I mean, you got SMU is obviously one of our colleges here, and at a basketball game there, fans at a basketball game there were screaming, "Fire Nico." I mean, this is not like things have gotten easier for Nico Harrison, but again, he really thinks this is what is going to help this team in the long run. Well, look where they are. They're almost in the playoffs. So, now, again, I do want to add, though, the Mavs have been just destroyed by injuries of late. And, that's certainly not helping the situation either. Like, it's really the worst of all worlds for this team. But
really,
it will, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Nico. I mean, I don't think, you're going to see anything in the next couple of months. And clearly the Dumonts like him and trust him, or they wouldn't have let this happen.
Julie, one of the things I'm interested in is, obviously, like you were saying before, Dallas is actually kind of a really incredible sports town. Does the downtick in the Mavericks right now change that as a whole? Do you think it has any effect on the town itself?
Well, I mean, I think they're going to, I think we all know from our fan bases, you get frustrated with your fan bases at times. Like, listen, I'm from Buffalo. I remember when we were 2-14, I'm still a Bills fan. You kind of get through it, you push through. So I think it's a frustrating time. But there's, again, with a city like Dallas, too, there are so many sports here. I think we get overlooked in that respect. There's so many different sports here. We have WNBA. I mean, we have so much going on that I think while people are frustrated with the Mavericks, eventually they'll stick it out. And there's still plenty of great sports for people here.
Yeah, I think the Wings are supposed to get the number 1 draft pick. Is that right?
They're supposed to get the number 1, the new Caitlin Clark. So that's always exciting. And, seeing as now we can say that this was brought to you by the Dallas Chamber of Commerce, I can again say we really are a great sports town.
Our thanks to Bloomberg Dallas Bureau Chief Julie Fine for joining us. Up next, we're marking International Women's Day this weekend with a conversation on the rise of women's sports and whether leagues can capitalize on recent momentum and start paying players their due. That is straight ahead on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. For my colleagues Damian Sassower and Vanessa Perdomo, I'm Michael Barr. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with Damian Sassower and Vanessa Perdomo. Scarlet Fu is on assignment. The WNBA is coming off a great season, powered in part by the rise of superstar Caitlin Clark.
Clark the steal. Mitchell the knockaway. Clark's 3. It's good.
It's part of a larger rise in popularity for women's sports across the board, but the players still earn a lot less than their male counterparts.
Our very own Vanessa Perdomo and Bloomberg News reporter Jennah Haque did some reporting on how players are seeking a bigger cut of the billions of dollars now flowing into women's sports. And Jennah joins us now to discuss.
Thanks for having me.
I get frustrated because I get tired that it's taken this long for this to take place. Why so blasted long?
Well, the short answer there is sexism, I would say. So that's really the short answer there, Michael. But I think the reason why, we decided to write this piece was because of everything that happened last year. So we really have this thesis of 2024 was the year of women's sports, but they still didn't get the chunk of the money that was, we were seeing with the investment coming in. So we wanted to look at what's at stake for them to really get that money this year.
Now you guys got to correct this one for me because I didn't know the statistic. Is that right that of the men's and the women's NBA regular season that was consumed in 2024, it was 60% men's, 40% women's? Is that right? So in terms of the revenue generated, it's 60-40 split, yet you guys point out that part of the revenue sharing for the players, it's only 3% to the women. Is that right?
Yeah, Jennah, can you get into that? Because there was that, there was so much more about that revenue sharing that we weren't really able to get into the piece. It's really in the weeds. Jennah, can you explain that?
Totally. Yeah, so basically the NBA and WNBA have recently inked this new media rights deal that's considered historic for both leagues.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's not equal or historic in terms of equal pay. So you're exactly right that the WNBA over this entire last season has, and compared with the NBA, the WNBA has captured around 40% of the ratings.
Wow.
In terms of money that they're actually getting to pay players and to actually fund the league, that's only around 3% of the money. So there's still this, even with these kind of historic media rights deals that they say are some of the best kind of deals for women's sports, it's still not at all equal or even close to equal.
There are so many women that are out there that are kicking butt and taking names, but in 2024, there's one name that just kerpow. We are now, we are arriving, Jennah, and it's Caitlin Clark.
Oh, yes, Miss Clark.
Yeah, can you explain to the audience her impact and what she has meant, not just obviously to the WNBA, but to women's sports in general?
Totally. So Caitlin Clark obviously had a historic record career in college basketball. And so then when she arrived to the WNBA, she was able to convert so many college basketball fans to the W, which then brought in a slew of corporate sponsorships, extra media partnerships, all these other deals. But also it shed a light again on this pay inequity. So Caitlin Clark, when she arrived into the WNBA, she only took home $76,000 in her first season. The number one draft pick for the NBA, so basically the exact same male counterpart for the NBA, Victor Wembanyama, earned more than 100 times that salary in his first season.
I mean, you make $76,000 and you're out there and, you're trying to do a job, that's one thing. But compared to what you just said to Victor Wembanyama, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, people were comparing her salary to a entry-level accountant, which I think is very funny.
No, but Michael Barr, you haven't even scratched the surface. Listen to this statistic that Jennah and Vanessa pull out of this article. Volleyball. Okay, professional volleyball player, right? And volleyball's, come on the scene. We've had John Patricoff, John Soros on this very show talking about Athletes Unlimited, but Pro Volleyball Federation and League One Volleyball pay on average a minimum salary to their players of something like $60,000. Yet that's just $6,000 below the minimum salary paid to a WNBA professional basketball player. That is, if I'm getting this right, correct me if I'm wrong, girls.
I think it's
bananas.
$16,000.
It's $16,000 less than Caitlin Clark's, but it was $6,000.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter.
Oh, minimum salary.
The minimum salaries
right.
were about there, which is it's exactly that. So the point in that we were bringing across there, and why I brought in volleyball into the conversations, because it's this next sport, this next women's sport that people are pouring a lot of money into. Now there's going to be 4 professional leagues in the U.S. for women's professional volleyball with $100 million pouring into each league. So the reason why they're able to have this $60,000 minimum is because there's only about 6 to 8 teams in each of those leagues.
Right, so less players, more capital to go around. Totally get that.
But it's their first year.
This is volleyball's first year.
Yeah.
That's exactly my point. You can't even, it's apples and oranges. It's just a different constellation entirely. And yet only 6 from minimum wage. That is just, anyway. So that is obviously, and Jennah, correct me if I'm wrong, why you have these new leagues like Unrivaled that are coming on the scene where, women players are getting paid. Talk to us a little bit about Unrivaled. What's their business strategy that they're able to pay so much more to your average player? And do you think there's a real possibility that league could even unseat and take some of the talent away from the WNBA?
Totally. So Unrivaled started actually as a spin-off created by a couple of current WNBA players, some of the biggest stars in the league, Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier. And their whole ethos was that players shouldn't be going overseas in the off-season. They need to keep being seen by an American audience. They need to keep being able to improve on their game while also having access to new media opportunities, to new corporate sponsorships. So let's give them a platform to pay. And, they were able to shore up a ton of investments. They raised a ton of capital, and they're guaranteeing all their players will make way more than they make in the W for about a third of the season.
And also Nafisa Collier, who's one of the co-founders of the league, they ended up doing this really fun in the middle of the season, one-on-one tournament. She won it. She won $200,000, and she said, in 30 minutes of play, I won the equivalent of my WNBA salary.
I mean, that is crazy.
Well, remember now, this is kind of what got Brittany Griner in trouble, because she had to go over to Russia to play, and then, well, we all know the story of what happened. But the point is, she had to go to Russia to go make more money than she would have been at the time in the WNBA.
Absolutely. So many players were traveling to Russia, to Turkey, to China, to Spain, to South Korea, and they were making essentially like 3 to 4 times their income in a WNBA season alone.
Yeah, mind you, like about 7 figures Brittany Griner was making overseas in Russia, and that's why there was that, inkling to go there. Diana Taurasi one time got paid by them to not play in the WNBA, and it still hasn't gotten to that level, but that's where this new CBA is coming into play this year, which is a lot of the reporting that me and Jennah did this on this article was this new CBA for the WNBA is really me make or break in this conversation.
Well, that's exactly where I want to go. I mean, when do we see that CBA negotiation take place? What comes next? What's the lead up look like into that, into that actual decision? I mean, I haven't heard much about it. I mean, who's in the room? Who's making these decisions?
So last October, the union opted out of continuing the existing collective bargaining agreement.
Which was with the men, right? Or am I wrong?
They have their own
different?
CBA.
That's
It's
different.
separate,
Okay.
yeah. So they opted out of their own collective bargaining agreement last October and are basically taking all of this entire year to negotiate with the league to strike a better contract. And from the union side, the executive director, Terry Jackson, kind of told us it's like preparing for battle. They have hired tons of great lawyers. They hired a Nobel Prize winning economist, Claudia Golden. They've hired communications people, media people to basically just staff up and be able to say, here are the financial documents. Are we being undervalued? What do we need to be asking for? Here are meetings with the players. Here's what they want to prioritize. How do we make this work so that we can strike a contract that's good for everyone?
I want to give a shout out, since we're talking about the WNBA, to Serena Williams. He just invested in the new team in Toronto that will hit the league in 2026.
Yeah. And it's amazing to see, Serena come into the league in that way, especially because I've actually had conversations with her husband, Alexis Ohanian, because he obviously invests a lot in women's sports. He's invested into the NWSL and track and golf. But, he said he wasn't sure if he would get into the WNBA. So now Serena's stepping into that market, which is incredible. And I think even more impactful to have someone like her come into the league, come into a new team and say, I want to be a part of this. And obviously it just brings in more eyes and building in a new organization, new expansion. I mean, there's so many more expansion teams that are coming into the league in the next couple of years. So it's exciting.
So, Jennah, they renegotiated in October of last year, and now they're going to spend all this year in talks on a new contract, which is expected to take effect, I guess, next year?
January of 2026.
Okay, so we'll probably hear by Q3 or something, or as we get into there. I don't know. I mean, is there any expectation on when we're going to hear that they've been making progress, that they're close on something? Probably. I mean, is it going to be right up until, I don't know, December 31st? I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it really depends on how much each side is willing to compromise. We know that they've met a couple times already, and from the W side, they have announced that they've had productive meetings with members of the union, with advisors, players, etc. It's definitely still early right now, but things are hopefully looking good. When we spoke to the executive director, she had this tone of hopefulness, and she was like, "I feel really excited, and I'm I'm ready to do this big challenge, and I'm ready to stand with these players. And yeah, there was just an aura of hopefulness around her.
The reality
is
too, for the W, they want it to be the best deal that they've
Which
ever
means
given.
they want to do it as late in the year as possible. I'm speculating here because this is where I'm going. I mean, you've got Caitlin Clark. This is going to be year 2 of Caitlin Clark. It's going to be another big year, you would think. So if I'm the owners and I'm thinking about my wallet, I'm thinking let's get something done sooner rather than later before the numbers start to come in. But maybe I'm just speculating, but that's kind of right. I mean, that's got to be what you're thinking right now if you're on both sides of the of the playing field, I guess. So I mean, yeah, it's amazing.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly why the WNBA PA won't let that happen too early.
We were just chatting here like we were having 4 beers, and it was great.
And that's
Thank
how you
you.
need to talk about women's sports. We
That's
need
it.
those debates. We want debates.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
bring in both sides. It's great.
Thank you all for joining us on the Bloomberg Business. Well, you work here, and you work here too. So
We both work here, Michael Barr.
Thank you all. Our thanks to Bloomberg's Jennah Haque for joining us. You can read her reporting along with Vanessa Perdomo on the terminal and online at Bloomberg.com. Up next, we talk college basketball with Atlantic 10 Commissioner Bernadette McGlade. For my colleagues Damian Sassower and Vanessa Perdomo, I'm Michael Barr. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with Damian Sassower and Vanessa Perdomo. Scarlet Fu is on assignment. March Madness is right around the corner, so we wanted to check in on the college basketball landscape. Joining us now is Bernadette McGlade. She's Atlantic 10 Conference Commissioner. Bernadette, welcome to the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
See, I'm going to step out of the way for a second because somebody in this room has a serious connection to Duquesne. And Vanessa, you got to explain what it is.
Yeah, Bernadette, we were just talking before that I didn't even remember I remembered that I won the A10 championship, right? But I didn't remember you were the one who handed me my trophies when I won the A10's women's soccer championship in 2015, forever ago, right?
Wow,
so it's an honor.
Fabulous.
Yeah. One of the things that's so interesting to me about the A10 and our conference, I can still call it that, I think, is obviously we are a really basketball-centric conference, so we're really famously known for these Cinderella stories, the lower seeds in the March Madness, making it really far. I'm thinking of my Duquesne Dukes, who were bracket busters last year for the first round. So when you were looking at basketball-centric contracts, like conferences like that, how much revenue does that bring in for the school, and how important is those storylines? Are those storylines for the year for the conference?
Oh, they're tremendously important. On Selection Sunday, when any institution's name goes up on the board, there's an immediate surge as far as, the fan support, the alumni support, their development efforts, et cetera. And it doesn't only last for a year. Like what Duquesne did last year is going to be paying dividends for them literally for the next 5, 6, 7 years. And it's just, the iconic nature of what March Madness is a tremendous economic engine.
Bernadette, I'm just basically wondering how many conference commissioners are former players, and not just any former player, a former player who holds the all-time rebounding record at UNC for both men and women. And, in today's age of NIL, I'm just curious as a former player what your thoughts are of it and how it's impacting the conference.
Well, my thoughts are, now that you referenced my playing days, I sure wish I was still playing during the days of NIL.
That's right.
I could be killing it right now. And Vanessa could be killing it in her soccer championship as well. But I think that, the timing is right for the student athletes to be able to monetize their name, image, and likeness. And I'm happy that it's finally here. It certainly is going to change the landscape of Division I college athletics, but I think it's going to change it for the better. And at the end of the day, the real beneficiaries are going to be all the student athletes. And some individuals think it's just going to be solely, say, Division I football players at the FBS level. But across the board, we're seeing it, and a lot of the Olympic sport and many, many of our female student athletes are having a chance to benefit from it.
Well, Bernadette, I mean, I think everyone here agrees with you, but the problem is getting there is half the battle, and it is the Wild West out there, and we're hearing these awful stories of students committing to schools, not getting paid, leaving, their careers are ruined prematurely. I mean, what can we do to fix the problem here?
Well, I think it's underway right now. I think, pending on the final approval for the House settlement, which is slated for April 7th, there are a lot of working groups nationally right now that are putting together guardrails to be able to monitor what's going on and try to get out of this, as you termed it, the Wild West. And, some of this unscrupulous, decisions that are being made and student athletes being taken advantage of. There'll be a third-party clearinghouse. There'll be much more accountability, and I think it will be certainly beneficial to the student athletes and their families who are looking to participate at a very high level with these sponsorship deals.
And now, gang, time for a history lesson. Let's go back to 1975-76. That's when the Atlantic 10 Conference was founded. And if I'm right, there were only 8 teams back then in the Atlantic 10. It was called the Eastern 8. Now, today, there are 15 teams in the Atlantic 10, which brings up my question. Man, college sports has changed with realignment, hasn't it?
It really has changed with realignment. The Atlantic 10 has benefited greatly. We're really strengthened our footprint, obviously, when we extended further west and we brought in Chicago, Loyola of Chicago. We have St. Louis and we have Dayton in that western Midwest area. And then when we stretched our footprint further south with Davidson, when they joined the league, again, all heavily basketball-centric institutions with great academic reputations. Profiles fit really well with our mission and our values within the Atlantic 10. And realignment is something, as a commissioner, myself as well as all of my other colleagues, we have to watch our membership and pay attention to realignment every single year, every meeting that we go to, because it's really it's an unstable environment right now, and making sure that you not only keep your members, but you want to always be ready if you have the opportunity to bring new members into your league.
One of the things that's interesting to me about the landscape right now for college athletics and what we're seeing in NIL and what we're potentially going to see from the NCAA House settlement is how it could possibly affect Olympic-style, sports. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because, there will be this big payout, but a lot of it will go to football, basketball programs.
Yeah, I think the Olympic sports that you're referencing obviously are not going to benefit to a great level with what is termed the back damages that are being paid to student athletes who competed from 2016 on till right now, the present. But I do think going forward, the Olympic athletes will really have a great opportunity because they'll be able to not only take advantage of enhanced NIL deals, but their member institutions, if they're going to be increasing their financial support for their student athletes in the sport of football and men's basketball, there'll be some Title IX compliance that will be coming down the pike, and they'll be having to also provide those financial benefits to their Olympic sports student athletes. So I do think that there will be a domino type effect on the campus as we go forward.
Bernadette, you've been commissioner since 2008. And, most recently, we've seen some really big changes in the sense of the Pac-12 being disbanded. I mean, we've seen the collapse of the Big East. Talk to us a little bit about how you thrived in this environment. Talk to us about this media rights package that you just renegotiated with ESPN. Did that have anything to do about it? Clearly, you're this diamond among the rough, and, conditions have just been really, really, really challenging.
Yeah, we have a great partnership with ESPN, but one of the great benefits that we've been able to do, and I give a lot of credit to our President's Council, who really supported me in these negotiations, not only in the most recent negotiation, but 4 years earlier in the previous negotiation. And we have outstanding partnerships with not only ESPN, but with CBS Sports, with CBS Network, and with NBC. So the fact that we have 3 national partners that are international, the best of the best in media out there, really puts our student athletes, our teams, and our events in the homes of, everyone across America. I mean, in all honesty, I can't tell you the number of times people say to me, every time I turn the TV on, I'm seeing an A10 team play.
Yeah.
So that has really helped solidify our membership, and obviously we've been able to not only benefit it from the distribution and the brand exposure, but financially as well.
Okay, now let's talk about gambling, because March Madness is upon us, and I got to give it up for Duquesne, because they played a game March 1st against George Mason, and then the Dukes scored 50 points in the second half to win 85-68 over George Mason. And, okay, I'm not the kind of person to say, hey, this team could go all the way, but Bernadette, I like the Dukes.
There you go. That's what
they absolutely were unbelievable. And I mean, Coach Denbrock, the way he had that team playing at the end of the year, and they simply weren't going to be denied. And, I think the most important thing, and we've been stressing this with the NCAA men's basketball committee, is I believe that Duquesne was the 5th seed coming into the bracket for the 6th seed for last year's championship. And not only did they get the AQ, and so they earned their way into the NCAA, but then they advanced to the round of 32. And it just shows the depth of the Atlantic 10 and the strength of the conference. And at the end of the day, you really just have to get in the bracket to be able to then win the championship.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things on the other side of March Madness this year is the women are being paid, revenue sharing units for the first time for this March Madness. Can you tell me about that? Tell me what it's going to do for them, not only from like an equality standpoint, but from what it can do for women's programs to then retain the talent that we were talking about in, when negotiating NIL and all those things. What can it do for the conference and the programs?
Yeah, I think it's going to obviously enhance that. It's going to give institutions a chance to really retain their student athletes. But the most important thing that I think it's going to do is, now that there's a financial unit that's earned with not only getting into the NCAA bracket, but also as you advance through the bracket, very similar to the men's unit. Basically, the women's programs are going to have a seat at the table at their individual institutions, which I think undoubtedly is going to reflect on increased commitment from member institutions, because there's a very tangible return on investment when you see this unit that's going to start to be distributed this very current year. So it'll benefit the individual programs, coaches with their student athletes, but it's also going to benefit so to speak, the good of the game on the women's side, with, I believe, increased commitments on every campus across the country.
That's a great point.
Atlantic 10 Conference Commissioner Bernadette McGlade, thank you so much for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and have a great March Madness.
Our thanks to Atlantic 10 Commissioner Bernadette McGlade for joining us. Now, if you missed any part of that conversation or any part of the show, listen on demand with the Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast. Find that and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And thank you for joining us. For my colleagues Damian Sassower and Vanessa Perdomo, I'm Michael Barr. Tune in again next week for the latest on the stories moving big old money in the world of sports. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.